on the case, and there's been some developments. A new date that I have found that investigators are looking into. I just spoke to a neighbor who I hadn't spoken to before, so I'm going to get into that. Also, billboards. You guys have been sending me pictures. Billboards have now been going up in different parts of the country. And there's something else I forgot that's new today that I also got. Oh yeah, something about Nancy's front door that someone in the neighborhood pointed out to me that I hadn't thought about before that could be important. I'm going to get into all of it in this episode.
Breaking news in the Nancy Guthrie investigation. After 72 days of searching, the FBI just made a move that fundamentally changes how we understand this entire case. Federal agents have returned to the Catalina Foothills neighborhood in Tucson, Arizona, and they are asking for something extraordinarily specific. They want names, not general descriptions of suspicious activity, not vague recollections from concerned neighbors. The full legal names of every single construction worker and contractor who operated near Nancy Guthrie's home throughout January 2026. This is true crime case story, and tonight we are examining why this development matters, what it tells us about the direction of this investigation, and how an 84-year-old woman, the mother of NBC Today show anchor Savannah Guthrie, disappeared from her own home in a 41-minute window that investigators now believe was the result of careful, calculated planning. Before we go further, if you believe in the power of community to help solve cases like this one, take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe to True Crime Case Story. Your engagement pushes this story to more people, and one of those people might have the information that finally brings Nancy home. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and let's stay on this case together until there are answers. Let me take you back to the last confirmed normal moment in Nancy Guthrie's life, because everything the FBI is doing right now has to be measured against what happened on the night of January 31st, 2026. Nancy had dinner with her family that Saturday evening. It was an ordinary meal, the kind that happens in families across the country every weekend. When dinner ended, her son-in-law offered to drive her home. At 9:48 that night, his headlights pulled into the driveway of her residence in the Catalina Foothills, an affluent neighborhood in Tucson known for its spacious properties and quiet streets. At 9:50, the garage door closed behind Nancy Guthrie. She was inside her home. She was safe. That was the last moment anyone can definitively confirm she was okay. What happened next unfolded inside a time frame so precise that investigators have described it with a single chilling descriptor: operational. At 1:47 in the morning on February 1st, the Nest camera positioned at Nancy's front door went offline. 25 minutes later, at 2:12, a motion sensor on the property detected movement. 16 minutes after that, at 2:28, the monitoring application connected to Nancy's pacemaker lost its Bluetooth signal. The total window from the first camera going dark to the last confirmed technical signal: 41 minutes. When family members arrived at the house later that day, they found Nancy's phone inside. Nancy herself was gone. There were no signs of forced entry that have been publicly disclosed. No broken windows, no shattered door frames. What there was, according to multiple news reports from ABC, CBS, and NBC, was doorbell camera footage showing a figure in a ski mask, carrying what appeared to be an Ozark Trail backpack, wearing what looked like a pinky ring, and possibly carrying some kind of antenna-shaped object in a pocket. That figure did not break into Nancy Guthrie's home like a stranger improvising a crime in the middle of the night. According to the investigative theory that is now driving FBI field operations, that person walked up to her door with knowledge. Knowledge of which cameras to disable, knowledge of what networks those cameras operated on, knowledge of the exact window of time available to execute whatever happened inside that house. And here is the question that cannot be avoided. How do you acquire that kind of knowledge without spending time in that neighborhood, watching that house, studying the rhythms of that street? The answer the FBI is now pursuing is the one that makes the most operational sense. You acquire it by having a reason to be there that no one questions. You acquire it by showing up day after day in clothes that look like work clothes, in a vehicle that looks like a work truck, doing something that looks exactly like what dozens of other people are doing on that same street during the same month. You acquire it by being a construction worker. 7 weeks into this investigation, FBI agents walked back into the Catalina Foothills and began canvassing homeowners with active construction projects near Nancy Guthrie's residence. According to reporting by Brian Enton, senior national correspondent for News Nation, who has been covering this case extensively, agents did not ask those homeowners for general impressions. They did not ask if anyone seemed out of place or behaved strangely. They asked for rosters. They wanted the names of every contractor, every subcontractor, every laborer who set foot on those construction sites in January 2026. This is not a broad sweep. This is targeted intelligence gathering. And when former FBI Special Agent Steve Moore was asked what this means, his response was direct. To target someone, Moore explained, you have to make contact with their world. You need to understand their schedule, their property layout, their daily patterns, their vulnerabilities. That contact does not require knowing the victim personally, it requires knowing the environment they live in, and it requires time. Think about what the Catalina foothills actually looks like in January. This is not a neighborhood where strangers loitering on street corners go unnoticed. It is affluent, residential, well-maintained, but it is also a neighborhood where renovations happen constantly. Custom homes are updated, pools are resurfaced, landscaping is redesigned. Work trucks parked on these streets every morning raise zero suspicion because they belong to the visual fabric of the area. A construction crew operating 1 block away from Nancy Guthrie's home would have had a direct sightline to her driveway. Over the course of days and weeks of showing up to a job site, they would have absorbed information without even trying. Which cars come and go, at what times, which lights turn on in the morning and off at night, when the garage door opens and closes, whether the homeowner lives alone or has frequent visitors. All of this becomes background knowledge simply through proximity and repetition. And here is what makes this theory more than speculation. Tucson building permits are public record. Every licensed contractor who filed for a permit to work on a project in that neighborhood during January 2026 is documented in the city's own system. Their names are traceable. Their business registrations are searchable. The subcontractors they hired, the laborers they brought onto job sites, these details exist in paperwork that the FBI can and is reviewing right now. Brian Enton reported that there are several houses under construction in the area and that agents are requesting specific names from multiple active sites. Not one project, multiple. They are building a comprehensive list of everyone who had professional access to that neighborhood during the weeks leading up to Nancy's disappearance. That is not the behavior of an investigation grasping at theories. That is the methodical work of narrowing a suspect pool based on operational necessity. Now let's talk about what happened to the cameras on the night Nancy disappeared, because this is where the construction worker theory stops being one possibility among many and starts being the explanation that fits the technical evidence. Investigators recovered thumbnail images from motion-activated cameras positioned around Nancy's backyard, side yard, and pool area. According to reports from both ABC News and CBS News, those cameras had been recording routine activity for weeks without any interruption. Landscapers coming to maintain the yard, family members visiting, pool service technicians doing their work. All of it was documented in those camera files. On the night of February 1st, those same cameras recorded absolutely nothing. Not a single frame of footage. On the one night when they mattered most, there was complete silence. When investigators were asked about this, they used one specific word to describe it. Odd. That is not the kind of word law enforcement uses lightly. Odd means something does not fit the pattern. Odd means the absence of evidence is itself evidence of something. The FBI began asking neighbors directly whether they experienced any internet or connectivity disruptions on the night of February 1st into the early morning of February 2nd. Multiple residents told NBC News and Fox News that they did notice issues during that overnight window. One neighbor discovered that his Ring camera had no footage from that specific time period. He described the gap as uncanny. These reports, coming from multiple households in the same geographic area during the same narrow time frame, prompted investigators to examine a possibility that is both technically sophisticated and deeply unsettling. They are now looking into whether a signal jamming device was deployed in that area that night. This theory is supported in part by the doorbell footage itself, which appears to show an antenna-shaped object visible in the suspect's pocket. Signal jammers are not science fiction. They are commercially available devices that can disrupt wireless communications within a localized radius. They can interfere with Wi-Fi networks, Bluetooth connections, and cellular signals. They are also illegal to use in the United States under federal law, but that does not mean they are difficult to obtain. Here is the critical analytical point. A signal jammer is not something you purchase on your way to commit a crime. It is a tool you acquire in advance after you have done research. You need to know what kind of cameras your target has installed. You need to know what network those cameras run on. You need to know what frequency to disrupt in order to cut them off. That research requires more than a casual drive-by. It requires familiarity with the property. It requires either physical proximity over time or access to information that only someone with a legitimate reason to be near that house would have. If the suspect in this case used a jamming device, and if that suspect was operating as a construction worker in the neighborhood, those two facts fit together with uncomfortable precision. A person working on a job site 1 block away would have opportunities to observe Nancy's property without anyone thinking twice. They could walk past her house during a lunch break. They could park their vehicle where they had a clear view of her front door. They could make mental notes about camera placements, security systems, and daily routines, all while appearing to be exactly what they claim to be. Someone doing their job. This is why the FBI is asking for names, because if this theory is correct, the person responsible for Nancy Guthrie's disappearance is not hiding in some distant location under an assumed identity. They may be hiding in the most effective place a person can hide. In plain sight, on a payroll, on a permit, on a crew list that is sitting in a city database right now, waiting to be cross-referenced against other investigative leads. Let's talk about the 41-minute window again, because the precision of that time frame tells us something crucial about the nature of this crime. From 1:47, when the front door camera went offline, to 2:28, when Nancy's pacemaker monitoring app lost signal, is exactly 41 minutes. That is not a lot of time. It is not the kind of window you have if you are improvising. It is not the kind of window you have if you are figuring things out as you go. 41 minutes is what you have when you know exactly what you need to do and exactly how long it will take to do it. You know which door to approach. You know how to disable the security system, or at least how to interfere with its communications. You know where the victim is likely to be at 1:47 in the morning. You know how to move through the house without triggering additional alerts that might bring neighbors or police before you are finished. That level of preparation does not come from luck. It comes from planning, and planning requires information. Information can be gathered in different ways. You can surveil a target from a distance using long-range observation. You can hack into their digital systems if you have the technical skills. Or you can position yourself in their physical environment in a role that makes your presence unremarkable. Of those three options, which one is the most sustainable over weeks without detection in a neighborhood like the Catalina foothills? The answer is the one that gives you a reason to be there every single day. The one that makes you invisible, not by hiding, but by belonging. Construction workers belong on residential streets. They arrive early in the morning. They stay all day. They take breaks. They walk around properties assessing work that needs to be done. They talk to homeowners. They interact with neighbors. Their trucks are part of the landscape. Their presence is expected. And in a neighborhood where multiple homes are undergoing renovations simultaneously, one more crew, one more worker, one more vehicle does not register as a threat. It registers as normal. Now think about what normal means in terms of memory and attention. When something is normal, we do not encode it deeply. We do not take note of license plate numbers. We do not write down descriptions. We do not think to mention it later when investigators come asking if we saw anything unusual. Because it was not unusual, it was a guy in work boots and a high-visibility vest doing a job, and because it was normal, it was forgettable. And because it was forgettable, it was perfect cover. The FBI understands this. That is why they are not asking neighbors to remember what stood out. They are asking contractors to provide documentation of who was employed. They are collecting names from sources that do not rely on human memory. Payroll records, permit applications, subcontractor agreements, insurance filings. These documents exist independently of whether anyone noticed anything suspicious. They exist because construction work, when done legally, generates a paper trail. That paper trail is what the FBI is following right now, and if the suspect in this case was working legally under their real name, that trail leads directly to them. If they were working under a false identity, that trail leads to the person who hired them, who may have records, photographs, or other identifying information. If they were working off the books, that trail leads to the general contractor, who might remember details about how they were recruited, what vehicle they drove, or who referred them to the job. Every name the FBI collects is a lead. Every lead is a data point. And data points, when you have enough of them, start to form patterns. Someone on one of those lists may have a criminal history that makes them a priority for follow-up. Someone may have left that job abruptly around the time Nancy disappeared. Someone may have given inconsistent information about their background during the hiring process. Someone may have been fired for reasons that, in hindsight, look more significant than they did at the time. This is how investigations move from theory to evidence. You develop a hypothesis based on the facts you have. The FBI's hypothesis, supported by the statements of former agents like Steve Moore, is that Nancy was targeted. Targeting requires observation. Observation requires access. Access in a residential neighborhood requires explanation. Construction work provides that explanation. So you collect the names of everyone who had that explanation in the relevant time frame, and you start ruling people out, or ruling them in based on additional criteria. What are those criteria? They have not been made public in detail, but we can infer some of them from what investigators have said and done. Physical description matching the doorbell footage. Height, build, visible characteristics like the pinky ring. Proximity to the crime scene during the relevant dates. Access to tools or knowledge that would enable camera interference. History of similar offenses or behaviors that suggest capability. Gaps in alibi or inconsistencies in statements. Any one of these factors alone might not mean much. Multiple factors together start to build a profile, and this is where the public can play a role. If you live in the Tucson area, if you know someone who worked construction in the Catalina foothills in January 2026, if you noticed anything that did not sit right at the time but you dismissed it as probably nothing, now is the time to report it. The FBI has a tip line specifically for this case. Local law enforcement is coordinating with federal agents. Information that seems insignificant to you might be the piece that connects two other pieces investigators already have. You do not need to be certain. You do not need to have proof. You just need to pass along what you observed or what you know, and let trained investigators determine whether it matters. This is how cases get solved. Not usually by one dramatic breakthrough, but by the accumulation of small details from multiple sources that together form a picture clear enough to act on. Let's return to the timeline one more time because I want you to understand just how narrow the window of opportunity was for someone to execute this crime. Nancy's son-in-law dropped her off at 9:50. The first camera disruption happened at 1:47. That is a gap of nearly 4 hours. What was the suspect doing during those 4 hours? If they were already in the area, where were they positioned? If they arrived during that window, how did they approach without being seen by other cameras or neighbors who might still have been awake? These are questions the FBI is working to answer, and the construction worker theory provides plausible explanations. If the suspect had been working in the neighborhood for weeks, they would know which streets had the most camera coverage and which had blind spots. They would know which neighbors kept late hours and which went to bed early. They would know where they could park a vehicle without it being visible from Nancy's house or from other homes with active security systems. They could have positioned themselves in advance, possibly even before Nancy returned home that night, in a location they had already identified as safe during previous observation. They could have waited until they were confident the neighborhood was asleep, until the lights in surrounding homes had gone dark, until the risk of being seen was at its lowest point. Then they moved. 1:47, camera offline. 2:12, motion detected. 2:28, pacemaker signal lost. 41 minutes, and Nancy Guthrie was gone. The pacemaker detail is particularly significant. Pacemaker monitoring systems use Bluetooth technology to transmit data from the device implanted in the patient's chest to a bedside monitor, which then sends information to healthcare providers over a cellular or internet connection. For that signal to be lost, one of several things had to happen. The pacemaker itself stopped functioning, which is highly unlikely given that these devices are designed to be extraordinarily reliable. The bedside monitor was disabled or removed. The Bluetooth connection between the pacemaker and the monitor was interrupted, or the internet or cellular connection from the monitor to the remote servers was cut. Given that other cameras and internet-connected devices in the area also experienced disruptions at the same time, the most likely explanation is that a jamming device interfered with all wireless communications in a localized area. But here is what makes that both technologically sophisticated and operationally significant. If you are going to use a jammer, you need to understand the risks. Jamming signals can potentially be detected. It can interfere with communications beyond your intended target, which increases the chance that someone notices something is wrong. It requires carrying additional equipment, which means additional risk if you are seen. Someone willing to take those risks is someone who has weighed the options and decided that the benefit of disabling security systems outweighs the potential downsides. That is not impulsive decision-making. That is calculated strategy. And calculated strategy, once again, points back to planning, preparation, and knowledge acquired over time. The more we examine each element of this case, the more they point in the same direction. The precision of the timing, the knowledge of camera locations, the technical capability to interfere with signals. the absence of forced entry suggesting either access was granted or achieved through means that did not require breaking windows or doors. All of it fits a profile of someone who had studied this target, who had prepared for this event, and who had a plausible reason to be in that neighborhood without raising suspicion while that preparation was taking place. Construction workers are not the only people who could fit that profile. Delivery drivers, utility workers, landscapers, even regular visitors to other homes in the area could theoretically have similar access. But construction workers have something the others do not: extended duration. A delivery driver might pass through a neighborhood multiple times, but each visit is brief. A utility worker might spend a few hours on site for a specific repair. A landscaper might have a weekly schedule, but their work is typically completed in a morning or afternoon. Construction crews working on major renovation projects are on site for weeks or even months. They are there when the sun comes up. They are there when it goes down. They take lunch breaks in their trucks. They walk the property discussing plans. They have legitimate reasons to be looking at neighboring homes, assessing access points, observing traffic patterns. That extended presence creates opportunities for observation that shorter visits simply do not provide. And those opportunities compound over time. One day you notice what time the garage door opens. Another day you notice which car leaves and which stays. Another day you see a family member visit and you note how long they stay. Another day you observe the homeowner taking out trash and you see they are alone. None of these observations by themselves means anything. But together, over weeks, they build a complete picture of vulnerability and routine. This is why the FBI's request for names is so significant. They are not just looking for one suspect, they are building a database of everyone who had that kind of extended observational access. And within that database, they will apply filters. Who has a criminal record? Who left the area suddenly? Who cannot be located for follow-up questioning? Who matches physical descriptors? Who owned or had access to a vehicle consistent with witness reports? Who had knowledge of security systems or technical skills that would enable signal interference? Each filter narrows the pool, and with every person they can conclusively rule out, the remaining names become more significant. This is patient, methodical investigative work. It does not produce immediate arrests, it does not generate dramatic press conferences, but it is exactly the kind of work that builds cases solid enough to take to trial. Nancy Guthrie has now been missing for more than 70 days. Her daughter, Savannah Guthrie, has used her platform to keep this case in the public eye. Billboards have gone up in multiple states with Nancy's photograph and information about the case. The FBI has devoted substantial resources to this investigation, treating it as a critical missing persons case with potential foul play. And now, with the focus on construction workers, the investigation has a specific investigative lane to pursue. What happens next depends on what those names reveal. It depends on whether anyone on those crew lists matches other evidence investigators have not made public. It depends on whether someone with knowledge decides to come forward. It depends on whether a piece of physical evidence, a tool, a vehicle, a device, can be connected to a specific individual. It depends on persistence, on methodical elimination of possibilities, and on the hope that somewhere in the data there is a thread that, when pulled, unravels the entire mystery. This is True Crime Case Story, and we are staying on this case. If this investigation matters to you, if you want to see justice for Nancy Guthrie and answers for her family, make sure you are subscribed to this channel. Hit the like button on this video to push it to more people who might have information. Turn on notifications so you see every update the moment we post it. And if you have any information, no matter how small, contact the FBI. Your tip could be the one that matters. We will continue to follow every development in this case, every new detail, every investigative turn. Nancy Guthrie deserves to be found, her family deserves answers, and this community deserves to know what happened on that February morning in the Catalina foothills. A man in work clothes on a street with active construction sites has cover built directly into his presence. Nobody calls it in. Nobody questions what he is doing there. He belongs to that landscape. And a man who belongs can learn everything he needs to know about a target's security systems, daily routines, and vulnerabilities without ever raising an alarm. That is not coincidence. That is access. I want to walk you through what I believe is the most analytically significant behavioral pattern in this entire investigation, and I am going to ask you to hold 3 dates in your mind simultaneously. January 11th, January 24th, February 1st, 3 dates, 3 Saturday nights. one pattern that the FBI is now pursuing with extraordinary focus. The FBI has been specifically requesting surveillance footage from January 11th and January 24th, not broad requests for anything unusual, not general canvassing of weeks of footage. Agents have been standing beside neighbors, personally watching as they scroll through archived camera recordings from those exact time windows. For January 11th, the Pima County Sheriff's Department requested footage covering 9 in the evening to midnight. That level of precision does not come from guesswork. It comes from investigative intelligence pointing to a specific window during which investigators believe something significant occurred. Former FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer told Newsweek that the suspect conducted what she assessed as a trial run on January 11th, 3 weeks before Nancy's abduction. She described it as a risky move and stated directly that if he had been seen that night, Nancy might never have been taken. January 24th falls exactly 1 week before February 1st, another Saturday. Another window during which investigators believe the suspect may have returned to the neighborhood, possibly to confirm details, verify timing, or conduct a final assessment before executing the crime. Here is the behavioral inference that keeps emerging from this timeline. If the suspect held a regular weekday job, and the construction profile fits that employment pattern precisely, the weekends were his operational window to move through that neighborhood without the cover of his crew, without tools in hand that would explain his presence, without a work truck parked at a nearby job site providing a reason for him to be on that street. The weekends gave him the opportunity to observe the target property during the same time frame he would eventually strike, to confirm the window between the garage door closing and the entire neighborhood going dark, to test whether cameras captured movement during those late hours, to assess risk. 3 Saturday nights, each one building knowledge week by week. The FBI is not asking neighbors for footage from those specific dates randomly. They believe something was captured on camera during one or both of those windows that connects directly to the person they are already building a case around. The construction canvas, the request for names from job sites, and the Saturday night footage requests are not separate lines of investigation. They are the same investigation moving from 2 directions toward the same individual. On February 10th, the FBI released images from Nancy Guthrie's doorbell camera. Those images show a suspect approximately 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches tall. Average build, wearing a black ski mask and an Ozark Trail backpack, a model sold widely at Walmart stores. A firearm appears to be holstered unusually near the center of his waist rather than on his hip. But the mask did not cover everything. And this is where the physical profile becomes personally significant to someone who may be watching this right now. Retired FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer told Newsweek that this suspect is, in her professional assessment, very identifiable. She pointed to visible eyebrows, a black mustache, and a pinky ring as distinguishing features. She stated plainly that someone already knows who this person is. Not in the abstract, not as a vague possibility. Someone in this suspect's life, someone who has seen his face, his hands, his mannerisms, already possesses the information necessary to identify him. Retired FBI profiler Jim Clemente added a detail that I believe is one of the most important analytical observations any expert has made about the suspect's behavior inside that home. The suspect did not cover his mouth. He spent 41 minutes inside Nancy Guthrie's house breathing, potentially depositing DNA on surfaces throughout the property with every exhalation. Clemente estimated the suspect is likely in his 30s or 40s, has no professional criminal background based on behavioral indicators, and described him as someone whose actions before and after this crime would have been visible to the people around him. Visible to the people around him. Think carefully about what that means in the context of a construction crew working 1 block from Nancy's home. A man you worked alongside in January. A man you ate lunch beside on a job site with a direct view of her driveway. A man whose face you know, whose eyebrows you have seen, whose mustache and pinky ring are not abstract descriptions from a wanted poster, but specific features attached to a real person you can picture in your mind right now. Retired FBI agent Maureen O'Connell used a vivid metaphor to describe the psychological pressure on anyone who has knowledge about this case. She said the people who know what happened are sitting in an air fryer, $1.2 million in reward money is on the table, payable anonymously. That calculation is being made every day by someone sitting very close to the answer. The pressure of that knowledge, combined with the financial incentive and the moral weight of an 84-year-old woman missing for more than 70 days, creates an environment where someone's silence may eventually crack. The FBI recovered mixed DNA samples from inside Nancy's home. Mixed DNA means more than one contributor. Those samples did not match anyone in CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, which is the federal database containing over 19 million known offender profiles. When a sample does not hit in CODIS, it means the person who left that DNA has never been arrested and convicted of a felony serious enough to require DNA collection, or their profile was not successfully uploaded to the system. Investigators turn to investigative genetic genealogy, the same forensic science that identified the Golden State Killer after decades of his crimes remaining unsolved. Genetic genealogy uses DNA evidence from a crime scene and compares it to publicly available genetic databases built by Ancestry and family tree websites. When a partial match is found, investigators can build family trees to narrow down potential suspects. But there is a significant obstacle in Nancy's case. Leading forensic genealogist C.C. Moore told NewsNation that investigators currently cannot separate the mixed DNA profiles from each other. The software available right now is not successfully resolving that sample into individual contributor profiles. When Moore hears estimates suggesting resolution could take a year, she interprets that as a signal that investigators are waiting on scientific advancements that do not fully exist yet. The technology to cleanly separate complex mixed DNA samples is still developing. That is the wall. It is real. It is documented. And it is exactly why the ground investigation happening right now matters more than any laboratory timeline. The construction canvas does not require advanced software. It does not depend on breakthroughs in genetic science. It requires names. Names the FBI is already collecting from contractors and project managers across the Catalina foothills. Names being cross-referenced against the physical profile visible in the doorbell footage. Names being compared against whatever investigators believe was captured on camera during the nights of January 11th and January 24th. This is the fastest active identification pathway in this investigation right now. Not the DNA analysis, not the ransom notes that were sent to the family, not the Bitcoin wallets that were set up for payment. The names on those construction job site rosters represent the most direct route to identifying a suspect who fits the behavioral and physical profile that has emerged. If you were working anywhere in the Catalina Foothills neighborhood in January or early February 2026, you need to understand something clearly. The FBI wants to hear from you, not because you are necessarily a suspect, but because you may have information that helps rule people in or out. You may remember a co-worker who left the job suddenly. You may recall someone who asked unusual questions about specific houses in the area. You may have noticed someone taking longer breaks than necessary or walking streets that were not part of the work zone. Contact the FBI anonymously at 1-800-CALL-FBI. You can also submit a tip online at tips.fbi.gov. The reward for information leading to Nancy's safe recovery is $1.2 million. You do not need to have witnessed something dramatic. Sometimes the person who breaks a case wide open saw something completely ordinary and did not realize until this exact moment that it mattered. That person might be you. 72 days have passed since Nancy Guthrie disappeared. 72 days since her garage door closed at 9:50 on the night of January 31st. 72 days since a 41-minute window changed everything for her family and launched one of the most intensive missing persons investigations the Tucson area has seen in years. A man may have spent weeks earning the knowledge he needed to execute this crime, with a work truck that blended into the neighborhood, with a crew that provided cover for his presence, with a reason to be on that street that nobody questioned because construction work in the Catalina foothills is ordinary and expected. He may have walked past Nancy's house during lunch breaks. He may have parked where he could observe her driveway. He may have taken mental notes about camera placements and security systems while appearing to do nothing more suspicious than his job. The FBI is collecting names from those job sites right now. They are standing beside neighbors, scrolling through archived footage from January 11th and January 24th, looking for a figure whose presence on those earlier Saturday nights establishes a pattern of surveillance and preparation. They are building a roster of individuals who had opportunity and access, and they are comparing that roster against a physical profile that includes visible eyebrows, a black mustache, a pinky ring, and a height of approximately 5'9" to 5'10". The DNA wall is real, but the ground game is moving forward. The construction canvas is not theoretical. It is happening. Agents are knocking on doors. Contractors are being asked for documentation. Subcontractors are being contacted for crew lists. Every name collected is a data point. Every data point is being evaluated. And somewhere in that growing list of names is the answer this family has been waiting 72 days to hear. Nancy Guthrie requires daily medication. Her family has made clear that her health depends on regular treatment that she has not had access to since she disappeared. The urgency is medical, not just investigative. Every day that passes without her being located increases the risk to her well-being. Her family has offered $1 million for information leading to her safe recovery. The FBI tip line is 1-800-CALL-FBI. You can go directly to tips.fbi.gov to submit information. If you believe in the power of community and the importance of keeping cases like this in the public eye, type Amen in the comments for Nancy. Tell us where in the world you are watching from tonight. Share this video with anyone who might have connections to construction work in the Tucson area during January 2026. Your share could put this story in front of the one person who has the information that changes everything. This case is still actively moving. The FBI has not slowed down. They have not moved on to other priorities. They are in that neighborhood right now pursuing leads based on the construction worker theory. They are requesting footage. They are collecting names. They are building a case. And when a verified development breaks, True Crime Case Story will be here to walk you through exactly what it means and where the investigation goes next. Make sure you are subscribed to this channel so you do not miss a single update. Hit the notification bell so you see new videos the moment they go live. And if this case matters to you, if you want to see Nancy brought home safely and answers delivered to her family, engage with this content, like the video. Leave a comment, share it widely. The algorithm rewards engagement, and engagement pushes this story to more people. One of those people could be the person whose tip finally cracks this case wide open. 72 days is a long time to wait for answers. But investigations like this one are not solved by dramatic breakthroughs that happen overnight. They are solved by patient, methodical work, by collecting names and checking alibis, by reviewing footage frame by frame, by building timelines and cross-referencing witness statements, by following the construction canvas to its conclusion and seeing which names rise to the top when all the filters are applied. The FBI knows what they are looking for. They have a physical description. They have a behavioral profile. They have a theory about how this suspect gained access to the information he needed. They have specific dates when they believe he was conducting surveillance. They have DNA evidence waiting for technology to catch up. And they have a financial incentive structure designed to motivate anyone with guilty knowledge to come forward before someone else does. All of those investigative lanes are converging. The construction worker with the visible mustache and the pinky ring who was on a job site 1 block from Nancy's house in January. The figure captured on a neighbor's camera on January 11th during what investigators believe was a trial run. The DNA sample that will eventually be resolved into individual profiles as forensic science advances. The person sitting in that air fryer right now, doing the math on $1.2 million and wondering how long they can sit on information that gets heavier every single day. Someone knows. Someone has seen that face without a mask. Someone has worked beside that person, eaten lunch with them, heard them talk about their weekend plans. Someone noticed when they stopped showing up to the job site or when their behavior changed in early February. Someone has a piece of this puzzle and they may not even realize it yet. That is why cases like this require public attention, not sensationalism, not speculation about things that are not supported by evidence, but sustained factual coverage that keeps the details in front of as many people as possible until the right person sees the right detail and makes the connection that moves the investigation forward. Nancy Guthrie is someone's mother, someone's grandmother, someone who had dinner with her family on a Saturday night and got driven home and walked into her house expecting to wake up the next morning in her own bed. That expectation was taken from her in a 41-minute window by someone who planned it, prepared for it, and thought he could disappear afterward without consequence. But he left evidence. He left DNA. He left his image on a doorbell camera. He left a pattern of behavior on January 11th and January 24th that investigators are tracking. He left his name on a job site roster or in the memory of a contractor who hired him or in the records of a company that paid him. He thought he was invisible, but he was not. He was visible to cameras. He was visible to co-workers. He was visible to neighbors who did not know at the time that what they were seeing mattered. Now it matters. Now the FBI is asking for those names. Now they are standing in living rooms watching footage. Now they are building the case that will bring Nancy home and hold the person responsible accountable for what they did. And when that happens, it will not be because of one dramatic moment. It will be because of hundreds of small steps taken by investigators, witnesses, tipsters, and people who refuse to let this case fade into the background. Stay with True Crime Case Story. We are not going anywhere. This case will be followed until there is resolution. Every verified update, every investigative development, every step forward will be covered here with the same commitment to factual accuracy and responsible reporting that you have seen in this video. Subscribe now, turn on notifications, and be part of the community that keeps Nancy Guthrie's case in the public eye until she is home. Thank you for watching, thank you for caring, and thank you for sharing this story with others who need to see it. Together, we can make sure this case does not go cold. Together, we can keep the pressure on until there are answers. May God keep you and your family safe, and may Nancy Guthrie be found and brought home where she belongs.